walked through the Vatican doors, without the armor of a power suit, without the glow of political grandeur, just a man with a haunting question. Have I lost her? In front of him, Pope Francis smiled, but his eyes were razor sharp. You can conquer all of America, but if you lose Usha, what do you have left? A conversation began, unraveling the inner turmoil of JD Vance in these days. Let's follow along. The dim light from the towering stained glass windows of the Vatican Basilica crept down onto the cold marble floor, casting streaks of deep crimson, radiant gold, and emerald green, like blood, fire, and hope intertwined. The rhythmic sound of JD Vance's polished leather shoes echoed with steady, deliberate steps, but it was not the confident stride of a powerful statesman walking onto a stage. It was the footsteps of a man carrying the weight of an entire nation, and more than that, the weight of his own heart. He paused for a moment, his dark brown eyes scanning the vast space, where statues of saints gazed down with solemn but impassive expressions. This was not a place he was familiar with. There were no cheering crowds, no flashing cameras, no rallying cries of a campaign. Here there was only silence, and that silence was a sharp blade cutting deep into wounds he had tried to bury for months. JD Vance did not come to the Vatican as the Vice President of the United States, the man who had just emerged from the spotlight of a contentious election, the figure the entire nation scrutinized with relentless curiosity. He came here as a lost soul, a husband struggling to reconnect with the woman he loved more than life itself. Usha Vance. In recent days, American media had turned their relationship into an endless spectacle, a long-running drama that the public could not turn away from the Washington Post to CNN. From viral tweets on X to sensational tabloid headlines, everything revolved around one pressing question. Was JD and Usha's marriage crumbling under the crushing weight of power? Photos of Usha at political events, her lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes distant as if staring into an unseen horizon, became fuel for endless analysis. Whispers spread about their cold interactions, about the way Usha stood beside her husband, yet seemed miles away, about the heavy silence between them once the camera flashes stopped. And then, the question that no one dared to say aloud, but everyone thought, did the woman who was once a brilliant lawyer, once the burning fire beside JD, still want to remain in the enormous shadow he had unintentionally cast around her? JD stood there, amidst the grandeur of the basilica, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his suit, his shoulders slightly hunched as if trying to make himself smaller in the vastness of the space. The perfectly tailored suit could not hide the exhaustion etched onto his face. The new lines around his eyes, his parched lips from dehydration, the heavy gaze burdened with a world of doubt. He had not come here to beg for divine forgiveness, nor to seek a prophecy about his political future. He had come for Usha, for the nights he lay awake, listening to her steady breathing beside him, but feeling as though she was somewhere beyond his reach. He had come for the times she smiled for the cameras, yet her smile no longer made his heart stir like it had the day they met at Yale, when she was an ambitious law student and he was a boy from Appalachia, trying to carve a way out of his past. Soft footsteps echoed from behind, pulling JD out of his thoughts. He turned around and saw Pope Francis approaching, a small figure, yet radiating an inexplicable presence, as if he carried both the gentleness of a father and the sharp wisdom of a philosopher. His white robes fluttered lightly in the faint breeze drifting through the high windows, and his eyes that had witnessed the suffering of humanity, looked straight into JD's with an understanding so profound that it sent a shiver down his spine. "Welcome, JD," Pope Francis spoke, his voice warm yet carrying a tone that suggested he already knew everything JD was about to say. "I assume you didn't come here to discuss speeches that shake America or policies that capture the world's attention, did you?" JD took a deep breath, the cold air of the basilica filling his lungs, making him more alert, yet also causing his heart to beat faster. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect, then lifted his gaze, meeting Pope Francis's eyes directly. "No, Your Holiness," he replied, his voice lowering, almost dissolving into the vast space around them. "I came here to talk about Usha." Her name slipped from his lips like a confession, carrying both love and pain that he had long kept buried. He hesitated, his right hand unconsciously clenching into a fist before loosening again, as if struggling to control the emotions surging within him. "She is a strong, intelligent woman. No one knows that better than I do. But lately, I feel like she's drifting away. I don't know if she's still happy with me or if she's merely maintaining a perfect facade for my sake, for the title that all of America has placed upon her shoulders. Pope Francis tilted his head slightly, his eyes gleaming with understanding, though his face remained calm, as still as a lake untouched by the wind. He took slow, deliberate steps toward JD, each footstep echoing softly, creating a solemn yet intimate rhythm in the silent space. Happiness, JD said, his voice slow yet as sharp as a scalpel cutting through the soul, is not something you can measure by smiles or sweet words spoken in public. It is the harmony between the soul and its purpose. Are you afraid that Usha has lost that? Or are you afraid that you, with all the power and responsibility you carry, have unknowingly taken it from her? His words were like a cold gust of wind blowing through JD's mind, making him instinctively straighten his posture, his shoulders trembling ever so slightly. He furrowed his brow, lips pressed into a tight line, his gaze drifting down to the marble floor as if searching for an answer hidden within its faint, winding veins. She always says she's fine, he replied, his voice tinged with helplessness, as if he had repeated this sentence in his mind 100 times before. She smiles at White House dinners, stands beside me in photos taken by the press, always the perfect image of a politician's wife. But when we go home, when the stage lights fade and it's just the two of us, he paused, his voice faltering as if words were not enough to express what he felt. Her eyes are not the same. They are empty, as if she is looking through me to a place I can't reach. I love her. I love her more than anything in this world, but I'm starting to wonder if my love is enough, or if it has become a cage she can no longer escape from. Pope Francis offered a gentle smile, not one of comfort, but a silent invitation for JD to look deeper into himself. His gaze was piercing, unrelenting, as if flipping through the pages of JD's soul, a book he had desperately tried to keep shut. "Have you ever truly asked Usha what she needs, JD?" he said, his voice steady and calm but carrying a subtle challenge. "Or have you been too busy running from your own fear, the fear that she no longer needs you, that she no longer sees you as the man she once loved?" JD frowned slightly, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. He stood a little taller, as if to prove that he was not a weak man seeking salvation. "I have asked," he replied quickly, his voice rising slightly, almost in defense. "Many times. But she only smiles." That gentle smile I know so well, the smile that once made me believe everything was fine. "She says she's fine, that she's proud of me, that she's happy to stand by my side on this journey." He paused, his hands clenching together before loosening, as if trying to hold onto something slipping through his grasp. "But I don't believe her, not because I doubt her love, but because I see something in her eyes. A void I cannot explain." Pope Francis shook his head slightly, the movement slow but weighted with meaning, like a teacher correcting a student's misguided answer. "JD," he said, his voice now lower, almost a whisper, "you think happiness is a declaration, a simple, 'I'm fine,' that you can hear and accept? You are mistaken. A woman like Usha, the one who chose you, the one who stepped into your world, faces not only the pressure of public scrutiny, the articles, the whispers on television. She faces you, the enormous shadow you have unknowingly cast over her." He stopped, his gaze locking onto JD's, unwavering. "She is not just your wife, JD. She is the image that all of America watches. She does not just love you, she must prove that love every single day, under the judgment of thousands of eyes. Have you ever considered that she is paying a far greater price than you ever imagined?" JD remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin line. Pope Francis's words surged through him like an electric shock, making him instinctively take half a step back. He wanted to argue, to say that he had done everything for Usha, for their family, but deep down, he knew the Pope was right. He lowered his head, his voice sinking, almost choking. "She used to be a brilliant lawyer," he admitted, as if confessing to himself. "I remember the days when she would sit surrounded by legal documents, her eyes blazing with passion as she spoke about the law, about the cases she wanted to fight for. She had ambition, a fire I had never seen in anyone else. But now," hesitated, his hand unconsciously reaching up to rub his temple as if trying to ward off a headache. "Now, she must be careful with every word she says, every glance she gives. Every step she takes is scrutinized, analyzed, tied to me. to this title of vice president, and I, he swallowed hard, his voice shaking. I am the one who put her in that position. I have turned her from a free woman into a symbol that America feels entitled to own. Pope Francis stepped closer, his frail hand lightly touching JD's arm. A light touch, yet enough to make JD look up in surprise. You are right, JD, he said, his voice now carrying both sternness and empathy. But do you realize that this is not just her burden, it is your failure as well? A man as powerful as you, a man who can make millions. Listen, a man who can change the course of a nation, yet you cannot see the pain of the woman closest to you. You are winning the world, but you are losing in your own home. The words struck JD like a punch to the chest. His eyes widened, his breathing quickened, as if all the layers of armor he had built around himself had just been ripped away. Losing, he repeated, his voice hoarse, almost disbelieving. I don't want to lose her. I didn't come here to hear that I have failed. I came here to fix this, to keep her by my side. Pope Francis smiled again, but this time it was a sorrowful smile, as if he were looking at a man standing at the crossroads of his life without realizing it. Fix? He echoed, his voice rising slightly, laced with rare irony. You think happiness is something you can fix? Like a poorly written speech or a policy that met with backlash? JD, you are an intelligent man, but you are blind to a simple truth. Usha does not need you to fix her. She needs you to see her. To truly see her, not as a piece of your success story, but as a human being with dreams, fears, and wounds she dares not speak of. JD stood frozen, his arms hanging loosely at his sides, as if all the strength he once prided himself on had been drained from him. He wanted to argue, to say that he had tried, that he had done everything he could. But then a memory surfaced. An evening just a few weeks ago, when Usha sat alone on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, untouched, her gaze lost in the distance. He had asked if she was okay, and she had simply nodded, smiling. But that smile had not been real, and he had chosen to believe it instead of looking deeper. The weight of that truth made him tremble, not from cold, but from the guilt rising in his chest. You never truly listened, JD whispered, as if speaking more to himself than to Pope Francis. I asked her, but I didn't want to hear the real answer. I was afraid that if she said she wasn't happy, I would have to face the fact that I was wrong, that everything I've done, all this power, has not brought happiness to the person I love most. Pope Francis nodded, his gaze softening, like a father watching his child find light in the darkness. That's right, JD, he said. But you are not the first, nor will you be the last. Power is a double-edged sword. It lifts you up, but it also severs you from the simplest, most sacred things. You can stand at the peak, but if you cannot kneel before Usha, not to apologize, but to understand her, then all your victories will be meaningless. JD looked up, his eyes slightly red, but no longer lost. Then what should I do? He asked, his voice steadier, as if he had found a glimmer of hope amid the storm. I don't want her to be just a part of my political story. I want her to be Usha, the woman I love, not the symbol the world expects her to be. Pope Francis placed his hand on JD's shoulder, a light touch, yet full of strength. Give her space to breathe, he said, his voice now a whisper of authority. Ask her not to comfort yourself, but to truly hear what she has to say. And then, JD, prove that you are not just the second most powerful man in America, you are the only man in her heart. Power may make you great, but only love makes you truly human. JD stood there, a flicker of newfound determination in his eyes, though doubt still lingered. He took a deep breath, his voice now tinged with defiance, like a politician trying to regain control in a debate. But, Your Holiness, he said, if I give her space, if I let her speak her truth, what if her answer is that she doesn't want to stay? What if she says that everything I've built, everything I've fought for has destroyed what we once had? I don't know if I can bear that truth. Pope Francis tilted his head slightly, a rare glimmer of playfulness in his eyes, as if he were playing a game of chess that JD had already lost without realizing it. You fear the truth, JD? He asked, his voice rising just a little, carrying a tone that was half serious, half mocking. You, a man who stands before millions, speaking words that the whole world listens to, are afraid to hear the answer from your own wife? Power has given you the confidence to face your enemies, yet it has taken away the courage to face the one you love? JD's brow furrowed, his hands balling into fists, as if the Pope's words had struck a nerve he didn't want to admit. I'm not afraid, he shot back, his voice now raised, a hint of frustration creeping in. I don't want to push her further away. I've seen other men, other politicians, men at the top, lose their families because they were too consumed by power. I don't want to be one of them. But if I ask her, if I dig into what she's been holding back, what if she tells me she regrets choosing me? Pope Francis stepped closer, his gaze no longer gentle but sharp, like a scalpel dissecting JD's soul. And what if she says nothing at all, JD? He countered, his voice suddenly lower, powerful and commanding. If you continue pretending that everything is fine, that her smile is real, then you will lose her without her ever needing to leave. You will live with a wife who is perfect on paper, but a ghost in your own home. Is that what you want? A marriage that exists only to serve your public image? The words hit JD like an unexpected blow, leaving him momentarily speechless. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the echo of his breath in the vast cathedral. He lowered his head, his shoulders trembling slightly, as if the armor he had worn for years had just been stripped away. I don't want that, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I don't want her to be just a part of this performance. I want her to be Usha, not the vice president's wife, not the woman the media wants her to be. But how do I fix this when I'm the one who pulled her into this world? Pope Francis placed both hands firmly on JD's shoulders, his touch grounding, his presence unwavering. You cannot change the past, JD, he said, his voice now gentler but no less resolute. You pulled her into your world, yes, but you can still choose how to walk in it, not by abandoning power, but by setting it down when you are with her. Show her that you are not just the man America needs, but the husband she deserves. Ask her, listen to her, and if she says she is unhappy, then fight for her, not with power, but with your heart. JD looked up, his eyes now red but burning with a new determination. He nodded, his lips parting as if to say something, but instead, he only smiled, a weak but genuine smile, the first real one in this entire conversation. I understand now, he said firmly. I won't let power take away what matters most. I will go home and I will truly listen, no matter what her answer may be. Pope Francis smiled, the kind of smile that comes from watching a soul find its way to the light. He removed his hands from JD's shoulders, took a step back, and spoke his final words with a voice that seemed to etch itself into JD's mind. Remember this, JD. America may celebrate you as a hero, but only Usha can make you whole. Do not trade your family for glory, because when the stage lights go out, the only thing left is the love of those who truly matter. JD Vance stepped out of the Vatican Basilica, the blazing Roman sun striking his face like an awakening. The sound of his leather shoes echoed once more against the stone pavement, but now, every step was not an echo of doubt. It was the steady rhythm of resolve. A sudden gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of roses from a nearby garden, wrapping around him like a gentle promise from the universe. There is still time to make things right. He paused for a moment, tilting his face toward the sky, letting the warmth of the sun dissolve the lingering coldness within him. In that moment, JD was no longer the second most powerful man in America, no longer the face on the front page of every newspaper. He was a husband, a man who had just realized that the glory of the world could never fill the emptiness in his own soul. As he stepped into the waiting car, his fingers tightened around his phone, the urge to call Usha overwhelming. JD understood then that his real journey was not in political victories or speeches that shook a nation. It was in quiet nights beside her, in the questions he would ask without fear of the answers, in the way he would set down power to pick up the love he had nearly lost. Pope Francis had been right. America could give him fame, but it was not everything. And that was the lesson JD carried home from the Vatican. Not from thick law books or masterful campaign strategies, but from the silence of his own heart. Power is a brilliant but fragile fire, capable of warming or destroying everything. Family, is the solid ground, the lighthouse that guides you when the storm of power threatens to consume you. For a public man, success was not in the applause of the crowd, but in the genuine smile of the ones he loved. A smile no camera could ever capture, but one that his heart would forever remember. And what about you? What do you take away from this conversation? Let me know what city you're watching from. And if you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow we have an even more fascinating story for you.